So we got a special guest with us today.
Thank you.
This guy is a Brooklyn native.
Yes, sir.
Entrepreneur. He's a founder of a boutique business consulting firm called Rhetoric. Mm-hmm. He's also the co-founder of a new company he's starting that's catered to helping disadvantaged communities build their financial literacy skills. Mm-hmm. It's a community
capital consultants.
Yep. Okay. He's also a man of style. we got a lot of good comments on the flyer that said that suit was on another level. So we're very excited to talk with him today. Welcome to Pepper Soup Talk.
Thank you.
Stephon Braithwaite-Martin.
Thank you. Appreciate you guys. Really excited to be here to dive into some conversations, talk about what I have going on and how I got to the stage I'm at, and just chop it up with you guys. I see that we got some great food in front of us. We got some jollof. I'm excited. About to dig in. So
maybe we can start with what you're wearing today.
Right. Stephon, let's talk about the swag. Because that's something I feel like it's a great start actually. So talk to us about what inspired you to wake up and just make the world better.
I mean, look, man. First of all, I appreciate it, guys. So style has always been sort of really important to me. Since I was a kid, just like I liked dressing up. Whether it's something more formal like this, or whether it's just just regular t-shirt, whatever. But I think that style is a really important expression of self. It's one of the first ways you can express yourself without having to speak to somebody. So I've always been really into it. This is a little double-breasted vest I found. I can't even remember where I got it from, but I wake up in the morning and sort of just however I'm feeling is how I want to express it. But the very first thing, I grew up wearing uniforms in elementary school, but even then, my mom, immigrant parent, very much hey, look, always dress clean, always make sure you're tidy. So for me, it's you look good, you feel good. If you feel good, you do good. If you do good, as Deion Sanders would say, they pay good. So I try to do that.
Where's your family from?
My family's from Guyana.
If you don't mind, we could project a little bit because we want folks to be able to hear us well.
Yeah, for sure.
And if the sound is good, please give us a thumbs up because we do want to make sure that you could hear us well. Because what Stephon is going to say, he's going to drop a lot of gems today, and we want to make sure that you are able to hear every word that's coming out of your mouth today. So we are excited to have him. But go ahead.
I'm gonna drop a lot of rice grains too. But.
Talk to us about where you from and who you are, a little bit about your background.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like Aki said, I grew up in Brooklyn. I'm from Brooklyn, New York, East Flatbush stand up. Hey. And, grew up there, went to school there. And, coming up, my parents didn't have a lot of money, but they made it their job to sort of always make it feel like, we had something, right? So we never had lots of money. We didn't go on vacations or anything like that, but we were always sort of trying to operate from a place of abundance, right? Rather than a place of scarcity, right? So, if my mom can make $10 stretch, she's going to find a way to make $10 stretch and make it feel like, we're not holding anything back with this $10, So,
that's a skill right there. To be able to do a lot with less.
Yeah.
And being in an environment where you still feel abundant, even if you don't have as much as.
Right. Yeah, because we grew up in the hood. Grew up 2 blocks away from the projects. Yeah. My building itself wasn't super nice. Pee in elevators, all that stuff. But at the same time, we could never. My parents made it their job that none of that ever got instilled in us. You know what I'm saying? It was always sort of okay, you live in the hood, but you're not of the hood. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? So
it's sort of the saying, the saying goes you are the product of the environment. But sometimes there's a sense it's not where you live, it's where you're going. So I think based on what I'm hearing, you keep mentioning a lot about your mom.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to us a little bit of was dad also in the presence?
Mm-hmm.
Because this is a space where we sort of like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, we love our guests and all of us to be vulnerable so
Mm-hmm.
that we can make this conversation as authentic as possible.
Yeah.
So talk to us a little bit about that. Was also
Mm-hmm.
dad in the picture? Or if it wasn't, like how did that impact you personally?
Yeah, I mean, it was a little more complicated than that. So he was there. We didn't really see eye to eye oftentimes. And
Is he Guyanese too?
yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, like with a lot of, as I reflect on it, a lot of immigrant fathers specifically, right? Sometimes they take on this role where they're like, okay, well, are things paid for? Good, my job is done. You know, so we didn't come up like the closest, and even now, like, you know, with all the things that are going on, we're still not the closest. But I think I got a lot of my confidence from my dad, and a lot of my sort of like my drive and I won't say fearlessness, but my courage from my mom. And I think the two of those things came together into a pretty decent product, I might say. I think I'm okay. I think I'm a decent guy. But I coming up, you know, one of the biggest things that we did was my mom was really big on sort of affirmation, right? So every day, you know, she'd make sure that we felt good before we left for school, right? And it wasn't that we necessarily had to, you know, we weren't necessarily repeating a saying or anything like that, but, you know, she made us feel, myself and my little brother, you know, nobody's bigger than us, right? Nobody's more important than us. Nobody is better than us. And at the same time, we are no better than anybody else, right? So even coming up where we were from, where there's lots of poverty, lots of things around us, you know, I never went outside feeling like I was better than anybody else. Even though, you know, I was smart, I got into great schools, I was in gifted classes, all of that. I never felt like, you know, I'm smarter than that guy or I'm doing better than that guy. So it helps keep us grounded, but we were never less than either.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So you're from New York, and I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
What brought you to Philly?
A lot of things. So my older brother went to school at Temple, right? He's about 14 years older than me. He's much older than me. And so coming up, I'm in elementary school and he's in college. So I spent pretty much every single summer since I was like 4 in Philly. Wow. So Philly's always been sort of a second home to me. You know, he lived in Philly proper, then he lived in Ben Salem, then he lived in Upper Darby. So, you know, I was always here. So it's almost like a vacation home for me when I was out here. And so after I graduated, I taught for a little bit. I was in Houston, came back to New York, and then, you know, next logical step, I had wanted to be in Philly for some time because I was used to the area. And so, you know, I took the leap and moved out here. And I didn't have a job when I moved here. I didn't have anything when I moved here. I sort of created everything as I got here. And it's been a wild journey, but you know, it's been a rewarding one.
Oh, so now we are Rhetoric. You know, talk to us about that. You know, when did you start that business?
Yeah.
And you know, what inspired you to go in that?
Yeah, for sure. So Rhetoric started in 2016, around the time that I moved to Philly. Okay. And so I moved to Philly, I don't have anything, and the first thing I had bills. I didn't have anything but bills. And so, you know, I moved to Philly, and I'm just trying to make some ends meet, right? So to go a little bit before Philadelphia, when I was in undergrad, I went to undergrad at Binghamton University, which is in upstate New York. Okay.
My brother actually went to Binghamton.
So dope. Shout out Binghamton. Yeah. And so there, and even in high school, I'd always been a person that like loved writing, loved helping people, loved sort of consulting. So back when I was like in high school, my hustle was I had really neat handwriting. And I wrote well. So I used to get paid to write parent notes
Yeah.
And so yeah, if you miss class, I had you, right? I could write like your mom. I probably write better than your mom. And my mom was big on penmanship. She's a teacher, so I could write in cursive. I could do all that. So I was doing that, and then I used to ghostwrite essays. So so coming up, I would help people with that. I would sort of tutor, but also if you wanted to, if the price was right, I would ghostwrite the paper. And my whole thing was that it wasn't Stephon writing it for you; it was me writing it as you, but better. Right? So you had to send me something that you had written before. I would copy your syntax, your diction. I would copy everything that you did, but put it together in a better way.
Wow.
So it was a way to protect me, but also a way for you to, if you wanted to get better, you can read that and compare the two and be like, okay, this is what's missing.
Wow.
So when I got into college, I stopped doing that because you can get kicked out of school for that. But I got into public speaking. And I'd always been doing that in high school too. And I had an internship as like sort of public speaking, like sort of consultant. So we had students, professors, people working on their dissertations come in and don't Mike Pence me. A little flyer. We're not doing that. Thankfully, my hair is black, so it's not going.
No, you good. You good.
But yeah, so we worked on helping people like improve their public speaking skills. They would come to me with a presentation, and I would sort of build it out, right? And eventually, it got into sort of business consulting, and that was just me being extra.
So those public speaking skills, where did that come from? Is that something that you've always just been able to?
Yeah, I mean, it was something that I always
Did you were you in like a debate class, a club in high school?
Well, no. So like I had always sort of had a penchant for it. Like I just really enjoyed it, and I talked a lot. So there was that, right? And I don't know, like I was lucky enough that to a certain, as much as is allowable in an immigrant household, like I was always allowed to like say how I felt, right? So I just got really good from a young age of like expressing how I felt about things and challenging myself to think more deeply about things than most kids would. So that, and I read a lot of books. So I was in a good position from small. And I'll just eat books up. Like I was in first grade reading all the Harry Potter books, like and flying through those. Second grade reading like 800-page books and being like, yeah, no, I want this. Give me another one. Wow. So I wasn't, my parents didn't put me in some sort of like private tutor class or anything like that. It was just something I was hungry to do. But yeah, so fast forward to college, I started working with entrepreneurs and people who were working on their MBAs and stuff like that, who were coming with business plans and pitches. And so I started working with them on those pitches. So that's how I sort of got into the advising stuff. I'd taken some classes like that. I was a poli-sci major, so I really studied people and organizations already and how people sort of guide and mentor themselves and things like that. So by the time I had graduated and I'm in Philly, I was just tutoring. So I was tutoring public speaking, I was tutoring political science type things. I was tutoring people who were doing language other than English. And the way that this all blew up was one day I have a client who he's working on his MBA, but he's also doing like a pitch. That was his like final like capstone project. And he's like, dude, I'm awful at presenting. I'm awful at all this stuff. Can you help me? So we work on it. And I sit down with him and he presents to me his project. I'm like, yo, this is awful, bro. You're right. You are awful at this. And he's a smart guy, but he just like couldn't put it all together. Right. And so at that point I had already sort of been really interested in business stuff. I had like been doing some studying on my own. And that's when I sort of ran down that rabbit hole. So I like studied as if I was him, like, and went really into it. And helped him redo the entire capstone. And long story short, this is like, he's like 45. Like he was a guy who was really into his career, was a VP at some company, can't remember, and was like just working to get to the next level. And long story short, he gets an A,
Yeah.
right? He actually wins a little pitch competition at his school, which was cool. And he's like, dude, I gotta get you in front of some people. We gotta have this conversation. How long you been doing this for? Blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, sheesh, like today? I've been doing it today. So the way that Rhetoric started before it got into what it is now is he invites me to this like event. And I'm like, damn, I don't have no business cards. So that morning I'm in Starbucks. I'm just like, what am I gonna call this? Yeah. So I wake up at like 7 o'clock. I sit in the Starbucks till about 4 p.m. and I design like a cheap logo on Canva, come up with the name on the spot, come up with some business card things. I got my cell phone number on there. I don't have an email address for real yet. Like I sort of just put it together on the cheapest paper that FedEx would allow, and Rhetoric was born. Rhetoric originally started as public speaking consulting. Hence the title Rhetoric, right? Word choice, how you talk about things. And then as time went along and more people allowed me into their businesses, it became about business development, because I worked in sales my entire life. Right, my first job was at Foot Locker, then from Foot Locker, Banana Republic, from Banana Republic, which probably explains this, from Banana Republic to I worked in admissions, from admissions now I work in banking as well. So all the things I've done is sales, and I coach that. So from there it was about helping people grow their businesses from the perspective of rhetoric, right? What are you saying? What are the things that you talk about and embody in your business practices? So I always kept the name, and it just continued to iterate itself, and here we are.
Got you.
It's amazing. It just also sounds to me like it's not like this saying, like it's not like what you say, how you say it. But it's just also been incredible to hear your journey of like just trying all these different things until you're able to really find out like what are you doing now. But it's also like what's so interesting is like it takes that one person to discover your talent, and the next thing you know, that helped to launch the business that you're doing today. So it's not something that you thought about, but it just sounds like you were just trying all these different things, right?
Never underestimate the power of being can I cuss on this? Kind of.
Yeah, of course.
Broke as shit. I was broke.
We have to pause for a second.
I wasn't gonna go.
Do you approve this?
Yeah, I'm not gonna go too crazy, but yeah.
Keep it real, bro. This is a space. This is a space for us.
Right.
So be yourself.
Yeah. No, I was, and to your point, it wasn't just one person that discovered me, right? So like, because the rest of the story, because there's more to it, is I go to the event. I go to New Jersey, pick up the cards, drive back to Radnor, PA. In the one suit I have, I get all fly for this thing, borrow somebody's car to go there because I didn't have my car. And the dude didn't show up. So I go to this networking event at this like country club, and the one person who was my co-sign was not there. So I pull up and they're like, yo, who's dude? And I was just like, hey, this is me, right? I'm Stephon. They're like, oh, what do you do? And I'm like, I'm reading my business card. I do this. Basically, like, so I'm in this environment where there's like 30, 40 people who I do not know, I've never met before, who are all in their careers, do really dope things, who are there sponsored. I just got in through like the back door. And, that moment of sort of just like sink or swim was one of the moments that like brought me to that level. And thankfully it was uncomfortable moments like that and many more that really like sort of helped to push that. But
it's like so pressure makes diamonds kind of.
Yeah, no, for sure. For sure. It was there, and there was a few of those. If we have time, there's another wild story that's similar to that was pretty funny.
So something I'm noticing because with the hustle that you had in college, and then with what you've done and doing with Rhetoric, something I'm noticing is your ability to see things from other people's perspective and sort of put yourself in other people's shoes.
Absolutely.
Because you talked about with the essay, even I don't know if it was a tagline for it or that's what you're saying, but it's like you said it's you writing it but better.
Yeah.
Or we are Rhetoric. You said when you were you know, helping your guy out with his project, what he was doing, you know, you put yourself like as if he was the one doing it, and you know, he ended up getting an A and so on and so forth. So that's such an important skill to have.
Yeah.
You know, being able to see things from other people's perspective, you know, put yourself in other people's shoes.
And I want to make sure that we also engaging folks who are like tuning in today. If you have a question for Stephon, please go ahead and add it in the comment section. Whatever questions you have, we want to make sure like we make this as engaging as much as possible. So Stephon, talk to us about, so you just like, you discover that you have these unique skills, right? Writing, being able to also relate to other people, but also like helping other people, literally helping companies and people dreams, you know, become bigger than they will, all help them become better.
Right.
So as a black man in this sort of space, like you talking a lot about like this uncomfort experience, like what, like did you experience anything about you being a black man? Were people surprised that you doing a consulting and they realize you come in contact with it? They're like, is there any situation like that you want to sort of talk to us about?
Yeah, I mean,
and how that, like, why skills is so important, and how the skills that you have was able to change sort of like their mindset or bias towards you.
Got you. If I answer all of that, we're gonna need 3 lives. But
I'm glad you understand.
No, I feel it.
It was a hard question.
No, it's multifaceted. No, it's real.
I do want to make sure you touch on this because you being a black man, I do think that there's a moment here that we would like you to share with us. In addition to when people realize the skills that you have. Yeah,
no, for sure. I'll start here. So one of the first things I saw was when you're black, building something from scratch, and you're not in tech, it gets seen almost as a hobby, as a pet project, right? When you're in tech, to a certain degree, you're backed by something, right? Like when you're in tech, you can you know get into the startup culture, right? You can start using startup jargon. Right, you can start talking about raising Series A, raising seed stage stuff. You can talk about bootstrapping. You can talk about all these things, right? And everybody gets sort of giddy, right? They're like, okay, yeah, this is it. When you are sort of starting something more grassroots, and you don't have it gets a lot harder to raise venture fund money, right? And B, a lot of people around you are like, oh, that's great that you're starting this project, but it's not, okay, this is this person's business, right? This is an institution they want to build up. And so you find yourself as a black person, not even just black man, sort of trying to argue the legitimacy of this thing that you're creating, right? That you spent hours and hours and hours of, you know, fighting imposter syndrome, of, you know, trying to research the field, of, you know, trying to convince yourself and others that you mean business, right? That you're really serious about what you're doing. So I think that was the one prevailing thing that I saw early on. Now combine that with being, when I started, sub 25, it was bananas. Yeah. So, you know, then it was like, oh, you know, young black man, like, go after it. But don't touch my stuff, though. I hope you do well just with somebody else. Come back to me. So, you know, that was a big thing. One of my first sort of experiences really getting into it, once I like developed Rhetoric to a certain degree, was going to an event, meeting these people, making some good friends who are connections now. And, you know, they gave us an opportunity to sort of pitch the business. And, you know, I didn't really think anything of it. I was wine drunk. I was just like, you know what, screw it. I'm just going to say it. Yeah. And the guys who ran the event pulled me aside. I was like, yo, bro, can we talk to you in the office? And I'm just like, oh, shit, okay. So, you know, I'm sitting in there and they're talking to me about, like, you know, this business problem that they're having and what's going on. It was like right up my alley because it was like a sales issue and like a team issue. And I'd been managing, I had been doing all those things. So I was like, yeah, I could talk about it. Yeah. And, you know, they're excited because they want to work with somebody black, all of that. And then we started talking about kids. And I don't know, I must have made a face. I must have did something that implied that I didn't have kids. And they're like, you don't have no kids? How old are you, bro? And at the time, I think I was 23.
Wow.
Yeah.
And he was like, wow, okay. But then you can see how the conversation changed because we had talked about strategy for a minute, right? He had told me all sorts of intimate details for a minute. Yeah. And then he heard that and he was just like,
he heard the 23.
He heard the 23 and he was like, all right, yeah, we'll call you, it's cool. So if I lied and said 32, he'd be like, all right, cool, we could talk about that, blah, 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 right? But so those two things I think played a factor in the beginning. It was also difficult to get other black people to believe in their businesses because there's so much messaging that says that they shouldn't, right? So working with people in the beginning, it was, helping them. When you first start, and feel free to correct me if this is not something that you guys have felt. Yeah. When you first start, there's almost like a temptation to clout chase because you're trying to prove to people that like you're legit, right? So you start just doing things that you see other people do. You start doing things that are not your own identity, and it takes somebody who's really like comfortable with themselves to be like, yo, I'm gonna do it my way, and like I can see things. I'll take small things here and there, but I'm gonna do it my way. So a lot of I had an issue with it myself. I was trying to fight for it and try to be everything for everyone to prove that this black guy knew something. But I also was working with people who had difficulty doing the same thing for themselves. So it was like, everybody was struggling to find their identity, right? Because we were evaluating ourselves against this very white world and being like, look, let's say I started a water company. Unless I'm Deer Park, I'm nobody. And it's like, well, no, like Deer Park started somewhere, right? So you start where you're at, you be who you are, and organically it's going to start to grow if you play your cards right. So that was one of the biggest things.
I think what's interesting about running a business in general is the fact that your identity plays such a part, your own identity plays such a part in the business itself and the identity of the business itself. And so as you grow your business, or even if, let's say you're someone who had a business, let's say it failed, you start another one, like the journey of being a business person is also the journey of like becoming too as an individual, and it all it brushes off on each other, and so I think that's an interesting thing. I think anyone, like, no matter who you are, so might have been the first business you worked on, but at some point you do deal with a lot of those like struggles to it. And I think at a certain point you have to, and if you want longevity, you have to realize, like, you need to be true to who you are. You need to learn who you are and then be true to who you are, and then project that into the business.
And I think this goes a little bit back to the previous talk show that we had. We had Jasmine here.
Jasmine is dope. I love that. I love that episode. Yeah.
So she talks a lot about this idea of seeing emotional intelligence as a skill, but also like self-awareness. It's like very key aspect of like being successful in the business world, because either like you go into the business world having a sense of who you are, or you go into it having these moments that you sort of share with us help you grow, or get you to adapt, right? Because being black, at the end of the day, you operating in this white world, right? And at the end of the day, there's always this sense of like people kind of like not focus more so like the skill set that you have, but they sort of like focus a lot on your identity. The moment your identity come in play, then that becomes sort of like a hurdle, right? So, but for you at the point with Rhetoric right now, where you realize like, okay, Rhetoric is doing a lot of great things. Rhetoric will really help companies. So, when did you come to realization of this moment, and when did you come to the point where it's like, no matter what anyone said about Rhetoric, like I am confident in my business? When did you learn to get confident in what you do and what Rhetoric does for people?
I think that point came after a series of failures, right? And I think, we sort of romanticize this idea of failure as like, it's the only way you can learn. It sucks. Like, it's not fun. Like, it sure hurts. And, I think that after a certain amount of time, when you fall on your face and you're like, look, this is, I fell here because I did something that's not me. Mm-hmm. I think that was a big part of it. But first I would start with, there's a reason now, like when I'm consulting, so like I do a couple of things, just to clarify. So I do business consulting, mm-hmm. right? So sales consulting, growing your mission, stuff like that. I also do business entity creations. Mm-hmm. So if you're getting into the game and you're like, or you just want to register another business, like I can do all of that for you, right? So me and my team, we work on it. We get you registered with the state, we get your EIN number, we get all the stuff you need to open a bank account. We can help sort of set you up and get you on the path for funding, stuff like that. And in order for me to get to that stage, I was constantly fighting with, okay, I'm smart, I know how to do this stuff. Mm-hmm. And then like sort of sitting in front of everybody and being like, hey, look, I'm really smart, I can help you with this. This is an issue that you're having, I can do this. And not realizing I knew who my target audience was, but there was like an insecurity in me that was making me sort of reach beyond what it was, okay. Right? Okay. So you can have everything together on paper, mm-hmm. right? You can have a perfect business plan, but like the way that you execute it over and over again is identity, right? Mm-hmm. Knowing who you are, why you do what you do. Yeah. So in fact, when I'm consulting for clients, mm-hmm. we spend a whole 2 weeks, regardless of what we're doing, whatever the project is, we work on mission, vision, and strategy, mm-hmm. right? Who are you? What were you put on this earth to do? And why do you do it this way, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. That's it. We just do that over and over and over again. Because everything after that, whether it's sales coaching, who you hire, why you market the way you do, certain things, that all informs all the things that you do. Even if you're in a business that you're not particularly like passionate about, there's a lot of people who, do like drop shipping and stuff. Yeah. They don't really care about sports apparel, but it's an opportunity in the market. You're still putting all of yourself into it. Mm. And in order for you to do that and do it, like you said, with longevity and integrity, you got to do it for yourself. Right. That's so
interesting. So, Stephon,
mm-hmm.
So failure is not something like I feel like we talk about and embrace, right? Mm-hmm. Usually it's something that we run away from, mm-hmm. Especially in this business world, especially like being a black man in any workspace. Mm-hmm. There's this pressure on you where everything has to be perfect, or where you have to work twice as hard like anybody else, mm-hmm. for you to be respected, or mm-hmm. for you to feel like you're an asset. Mm-hmm. But I love how you talk about failure in a different perspective. Mm-hmm. So can you enlighten us about why failure is such a vital aspect of being successful, and what were like some of your real failure that you could share with us today, that we could learn from?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest lessons I learned about failure is that you can fail and not be a failure, right? Mm-hmm. So like there's a difference. So like you can fail in like an acute sense, right? The specific thing you didn't do well, you took a L, right? That doesn't make you a loser, right? Being a failure is really your mindset. That's like I've accepted that this is my life, this is who I am forevermore, like stuff like that, right? So so it's like so and that's not to like get to like a weird sort of like fake woke sort of like everything exists in the mind sort of stuff. Like you could fail and it's gonna hurt a lot, right? But there's something on the other side of that you have to see. You have to trust yourself enough to like see, right? Like you gotta get past like, okay, I failed right here, but once I get past that, what's over here? Yeah. So I think earlier on in my career, and even there's, if I'm real, even moments now where I'm more afraid of the mistake than anything else, right? Like. And so I spend all this time trying to avoid a mistake rather than trying to grow. So I start prioritizing not looking dumb, or start prioritizing like, let me not get caught or like get caught lacking in this stage, right? I'm playing defense all the time without really progressing,
And what's interesting too is because as you start to get more knowledge and over time, like you've been in business for years and you're working on your company, like you realize there are two sides to like knowing. Because when let's say you know less about what you're doing, less about the space you're in, maybe less about the statistics and whatnot, it's actually easier to be fearless, or easier to just kind of like go in a direction because you don't maybe see as many of the risks. But there's this idea that you don't know what you don't know. And so it's like, as you start to learn more, you start to learn some of these numbers and statistics and aware of like the different mistakes you could make, it makes it harder to not like say, okay, I'm going to be on the offense and like execute on the offense, like start playing more defense. But like, I mean, how do you get over that, that sort of hurdle where you're like, okay, I'm aware of what I'm doing, I'm aware of places that this can go wrong, but I'm going to charge forward regardless.
There's this idea of sort of like lateral thinking, right? So I can have a plan and say, okay, well, I'm going to do this, and then everything's going to end happily ever after, right? 100 times out of 100, it never happens. Like, it never happens like that, And I think the one thing that I'm happy to have in my arsenal, and this is definitely an acquired skill, is the sense of, okay, that didn't go right, now what? Right? And just like sobering yourself and getting like, feeling the disappointment, feeling the anger, the frustration, whatever that is, right? Those are very real feelings, and it's important for us to, feel that for a second, but now what? Right? It obviously can't end there, right? Life is not over, but you still want that whatever outcome, right? So now it's going to be to try to re-strategize and get to that outcome, So it's about constantly adjusting, constantly adapting. That's really how, you get to that level. I think when I first started, I had this like weird pressure on myself to know everything, right? Like to have all of the answers all the time. And particularly because I was young and black, particularly because I was not 25 yet, right? And I'm working with people who are like 55 and very wise people by all accounts. And they're letting me into their businesses. So I had this weird sort of like pressure on myself to be like, I need to know how to do that already. And it was like, well, no, like a consultant comes in and says, all right, we have a problem. I don't know the answer yet, but I'm going to find the answer by doing this, right? So I started becoming addicted to like the process, not needing to know everything off the bat, right? It's sort of like, it's funny because I hated math for this, but when you do a math test and you lose points for not showing your work because you just like wrote the answer down, like I had this weird feeling of like I needed to know the answer up front and not, okay, well I have a process for this. Let's work on the process and see what the answer is based on the process. And if the answer isn't quite what we're looking for, we go back through the process and do it again, and we do it again.
You're driving a lot of gems, man.
So that's where I was at.
Real gems, man.
Right, that's where I'm at.
I want to talk about. You mentioned process, right? And we live in a society where you had that, like, you want to have an answer. Do you think it's like a societal, it's a society to condition you to feel like we got to have an answer to everything for you to seem like you know what you're doing and overlooking the process? Or is it that, this is a moment where you meet other people who like literally would sort of help you to wake up a little bit and be like, okay, help you rethink the way. So talk to us about that. Are we conditioned to know the answer to everything? Or at some point, like you get this idea where rather than knowing the answers, you start to embrace the process. So talk a little bit about us.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you're looking at the way our economy is set up, right? Capitalism is really about producing the most that you can, right, in the least amount of time, right? So in short, knowing the answers and knowing them fast, right? It doesn't. So when you look at a lot of businesses and why they fail, especially the bigger ones, is because whatever answer it was the right answer at the time, and they made a lot of money doing that. But when the question changed, they were left with the same answers, right? So the situations changed, the circumstances changed, and they were unable to adapt because all they knew was the answer, not a process. So there are people who've made a lot of money really fast, you know, finding that thing, hacking it, you know what I'm saying, and getting at it. But the people who I've met and who I've learned from, and I try to learn from everybody, who have some real long-term skin in this game, are people who are like, look, I found out a process. And it might take me a little longer to find the answer, but it's gonna be a good ass answer, right? And I'll be able to take it and duplicate it over and over and over again because like I got it, you know. So
I'm just I keep just like laughing because we noticing a pattern here based on the guests that we have, and it's what I've noticed is like success is there's a system here that we're starting to notice based on the pattern. You know, multiple of our guests that we had on the show, they mentioning this idea, like focus on the process. And I want to actually go to, and shout out to Olivia, who's just actually had a question for you here.
Yeah, shout out Olivia, what's up?
Olivia said, you may personally feel as though failures are a win if you learn from it. But how do you ensure your potential clients see it that way too? That's a great question.
You can't. Like, and the thing is that the failure is really about you, right? So, you know, I'll give an example. So I lost a client early on that, I'll give two examples. I'll give one that was like sort of like not my fault, and then one that was my fault, right? So, and these were both very early on. I go to an event. I was very heavy on like marketing, getting myself out there when I started. And I meet this person who was a potential client, and she had an athletic apparel brand. And she's like, "Hey, you know, I really want to blow this thing up. I think I can." And she tells me, you know, so I go into my process, right? I get into my bag, and I'm like, "Okay, why do you do this?" And she tells me this like incredible story of how, you know, she had a kid, she was struggling with her weight, and, you know, while she was doing that, she could never find clothing that really like worked for her, right? That made her feel good. And, you know, a big part of, you know, wherever you are in your sort of like fitness journey or your personal journey, feeling good, like I said, is a big part of like how much you put into it, right? And so she struggled, and she lost a ton of weight, and she like worked really hard, and she vowed that she was going to find something that she was going to create something that made other girls feel the same way too, right? So I'm over here like, this is going to be incredible. Like that story alone can do everything. Right. So we set up a call, and we're talking for a while, and, you know, I go through her website, I do all this research, I get all this stuff together, and whenever I'm on a call with a client, I always give some free pieces of advice. So regardless of whether or not you sign on with me, right, you can do these things and expect to see some sort of result off of it, right? So I give her a couple of pieces of advice and say, hey, look, if you do these things, like you'll get there. Stop comparing yourself to your Nikes, your other stuff. Like you're not going to be there yet, but if you do these couple of things that they do, you might see some more traction, yada, yada, yada. She got a little defensive, and then started to like talk about like, oh, well, you know, you're not established, you're not this, you're not that, right? And at the time, and we'll talk about this later, I had sort of this tendency to want to do everything by myself, right? So I was building a website that I had no idea how to do. I was doing that by myself. And I expected high-end web developer results from myself who never done this before. And so I pulled the website down while I was working on it. Right? She's like, I went to your website. I don't see anything on there. And you're talking about my website, right? She was like, I told her to have more sizes accessible because she stopped at, I think, extra large. So I was like, you might want to consider double XL or 2XL, right? And she said, well, production costs. And I said, okay, that's fair. And then she also said, well, once you get past like XL, right, you're not really serious about like your weight journey anyway. But I was like, but is that not why you said you wanted to do this thing? Like you were at a different stage in your weight journey, you were trying to get to point B. You think somebody in a double XL isn't trying to get to that level? Right. But we go back and forth. And long story short, it was about an hour conversation, and I fell flat on my face, right? Because my whole goal was to get this client to sign, send her the paperwork, send her a proposal, and get my first client, because she would have been my second client, actually. And it didn't work out. Hung up the phone. I was mad. I spent the next 39 hours straight working on that website to push it out. Wow. Right? So like I stayed up 2 more nights and did it because I was just so mad. I was like, how dare she? What's going on? But that was a failure, right? I didn't close the client. I got ruffled during the conversation. I felt like I got exposed for not having the answers, right? Not having everything perfect, right? I felt all these things and I lost a client. But looking back on it, it was like, well, no, that client really didn't align with your mission in the first place, right? Because then she was like, oh, well, my photographer worked with Milano de Rouge. And I was like, okay, but your photographer also hasn't gotten you any sales yet. Great, you have good pictures of your clothes, but that doesn't mean anything, right? So I was like, photographers don't come with the marketing built in. They just are a part of the market, but whatever. So in that moment, it was about me, right? It was about my reflection and my being like, okay, this sucked. This didn't feel good at all. This is one of the most frustrating conversations I've ever had. I prided myself on like always being able to work out of situations and stuff like that. And, I had to really sit and think and be like, look, bro, if this ever comes up again, let them walk away, right? Because that doesn't fit you, right? Stop, you're losing more time, more energy, more money trying to be something that you're not, just to say that, or just to give the image of being this person, having the answers, doing whatever, right? So, that was one moment where I realized it was like, okay, I'm working with a client. It doesn't look good. It's not a good look for me, but I got to be okay with that and just get better, right? Like, don't be mad. Don't be sorry. Just be better. Like, just learn that, right? So that was one of those moments. So hopefully, Olivia, that helps. Because the failure is not just about what the client sees, because you can fall short on a client expectation. That's going to happen eventually. Yeah. But it's like, how do you iterate and be better and make sure that relationship hopefully isn't severed and you can work on that or whatever. Or if it is, it is.
And I think the point you made about, when you fail, realizing you failed, but you're not a failure. Right. I feel like that's what would... If you feel like a failure, or if you internalize that, you may not move forward, or it may be harder to move forward. And so it might be the difference between, sitting on your ass for a couple of days versus, just going straight ahead.
And think about it. Like, I think we look at success and failure in such weird ways. A good mentor of mine said that success is a lifestyle, right? And I always took that to heart. And I really thought about it and tried to dissect it. And he's right, first of all. So shout out to Josue Quinones. When you look at it, when we say, oh, this person is successful, right? We're saying they've attained, whether it's money, influence, something, right? All of that can go away, right? You can lose money. You can ruin a reputation, right? Those are temporary things. And unless you're continuously like working on it and trying to sustain it, it can go away. Same thing with failure, right? You could fail at something, but that's gonna go away so long as you put the steps together to make sure that you don't stay in that, right? So I can lose and not be a loser, right? So that's the difference. Yeah. So I think we're like, oh, that person's a success. I want to be like them, and it's like, well, no, they're a success today, but they got to be successful tomorrow, Wednesday, all of that, right? You can fail today, but you can win tomorrow, the next day. So that's how I look at it.
With the part of Rhetoric where you're helping to set up the businesses, like the foundation of it. And I know you mentioned that you also work in banking too. And part of the setting up business is setting up the LLC and getting your ducks in a row. Are there specific things that you notice your clients tend to falter on, or that's like a recurring thing with your clients?
I mean, all sorts of things, but I can like sort of segment it real quick. So one thing is that a lot of people start like operating businesses, because you can operate a business without having it like registered. Yeah. So a lot of people just start, which is, I tell people do that all the time. Start,
Yeah.
Right? Don't wait till everything's perfect. Start. Right? I think, what's her name? Judge Lynn Toller. She tweeted this years ago. She said, if I waited until all my ducks were in a row before I did something, I would never cross the street. Right? So they either get so obsessed with having everything perfect that they never move, or another thing is that they treat their business as if it's just like, they treat it like a hobby, right? Rather than putting like everything into it and making sure that the things that they put into it, they structure it the right way, right? I tell people your business is your baby, right? So if it's your thing, you put something into the world, right? You want to make sure that if it's your hobby, that's fine. It could be another stream of income. But if it is the thing you want to do, like, stop being scary and go after it. Yeah. Go do the things that you need to do, right? If you want to get the business bank account, get the business bank account, but also learn how to separate the funds, right? So to anybody who's an entrepreneur at home, if you have the business registered, open a business bank account, please. Because, and I just posted about this the other day, if you guys seen it, like when things like PPP came about, right? Paycheck Protection Program, right? Because a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of black entrepreneurs, we sort of just like commingle everything. We just operate it out of our personal accounts. We sort of just do stuff on the side because we're afraid of either the overhead or we're afraid of the things that we don't know, right? Again, needing to have the answer. We're skeevish about those things, right? Bring somebody on who can help you with it, right? Because you're gonna make way more money down the line when that happens, right? When we get into like, wanting to build a business and getting government contracts, you're going to want to find those things, right? They want to see that you're certified, that you have an LLC or a corporation or sole prop, whatever you are, right? They want to see that paperwork. If you don't have the paperwork because you're afraid of it or whatever, you're not going to get the job. Yeah. So those are, I think, the biggest things, the biggest hurdles.
It is 4:55. I just want to make sure we're mindful of the time.
So hit me with the hardest hitting, like.
Okay, so I got a question. I got a question for you. Okay. And this brings us into the company you're working on now, the financial literacy company, right?
Yep.
Because when you start, talking about financial literacy, and then you put that together with the fact that you also work in banking too, and I've noticed that. As I've learned more about financial literacy and become more financially literate, a big part of that is understanding how like the financial institutions work. What have you noticed being in banking, and then I guess now like in the business that you're working on, that most people who are just starting to like get into financial literacy or become financially literate, what do most people need to understand or where do they need to start?
There are a lot of people who are benefiting off of us not knowing shit. I'll put that. I'll start there, right? There are a good amount of people who, when I first got into banking, who are even my clients, who they're like, look, this person doesn't know X, Y, Z. Sucks to be them. Like I'm a finesse and I'm gonna work it out, right? That's how capitalism operates, right? People who know more get more. People who know less will continue to make them know less and find ways to extract the wealth from them, which sucks. It's terrible. And so Community Capital Consultants is myself and a good friend of mine who I grew up with in East Flatbush. And our goal is to help sort of enlighten people on the different ways they can make things work. Right. So we want to target, we want to help lower the rates of recidivism, for example, by working with people who are formerly incarcerated but want to get back on their feet. Right. There are a lot of people who are operating out of their shoebox. Right. House gets robbed. There's a fire. Now they have nothing. Right. And it's like, well, how do you pay these bills without like being forced to go into something that's like going to put you back in jail? Right. How do you put yourself in a position where, maybe your mom, your dad, your grandparents die, right? Are you inheriting wealth or are you inheriting bills, right? I have tons of people who like their parents have property or whatever, they pass away, but instead of getting a property that's paid off or something that appreciated in value, right? They're inheriting a mortgage or home equity that hasn't been paid on. And like, how do we just position ourselves a little bit better? Because there's a lot of things that we missed out on because of the world, right? Because of society, right? But there's a lot of things that we're just missing out on right now because it's just not in front of us, right? And it sucks to be like, okay, well, we just gotta educate. You're just uneducated, and it's like, well, what are we doing? People who know more, what are we doing to put that in front of people, right? Because we found it somehow, but we can't expect everybody to operate the way we're thinking, right? So otherwise, everybody would know everything.
Right. That's right. So basically, that's the idea of the Pepper Soup Talk Show. We hope that by creating this platform, we're able to actually change the course of that to get more of us, the diaspora, especially our black and brown people, to get more knowledge and skills in order for us to set ourselves up for success and not wait for the white man to come and save us, right? But if anything, like, perfect example is like the COVID, which we still living through right now. It's like, to me, it's just serve as a major wake-up call, right? So it goes back to exactly what you were talking about. This idea of waking up in terms of like financial literacy, it's so important. So talk to us about that. I think, guys, if we go out, just know like we running out of time, but we might get right back into our live just to continue with the conversation.
Yeah, I'm here.
But talk to us about how the pandemic came about and how did that serve as a wake up, and why does that sort of highlight what you were just talking about when it comes to financial literacy?
Right. I think it's important to note, for starters, that there are a lot of people who the stakes are too high for them to sort of just take this as a warm and fuzzy learning experience, right? So there are a lot of people who, once their money was impacted at all, right, they were already sort of at that tipping point, and once that got impacted, like, you know, there was no more lessons, right? They're in the lesson. They're trying to live it. They're trying to make it happen. So I want to make sure I take a minute to highlight that, because I think we'd be missing that point if we didn't talk about that. But I think one of the biggest lessons was, I think a lot of people sort of default to just sort of addressing situations as they come to them, right? So trying not to worry about something until it's in front of them, and not really thinking one or two steps beyond, right? The issue is the one or two steps beyond eventually come in front of your face, and you're not prepared for that, and you can't make it happen in that moment because it's going to last a little longer than what you anticipated, right? And COVID is a perfect example, right? You know, we always talk about having like 6 months of savings saved up and all that, right? Well, boom, COVID's lasted, we're on what, month 7 now, right? We're on month 7, right? So even that 6 month stuff wasn't going to work. And it was really just about like, okay, you know, you want to be prepared, but it's like, how do you adapt? How do you adjust? Like, challenge yourself to do that in every single way. Because there's a lot of, and you probably, first of all, follow me at StephMart_CEO. Please do that now. But if you see my posts, right, even though I'm an entrepreneur, I talk about that. I go at LLC Instagram all the time. I go at like this entrepreneur branded stuff all the time, because these situations, people start to just wag their finger, right? And it's like, I told you to find multiple streams of income, and it's like, well, if I just started, I'm still gonna be in a tough spot. I'm still gonna be in a tough spot. So, you know, it's crazy because, you know, nothing's perfect, but you do want to have a little bit of a plan. That's the biggest thing. And the second thing is, if you were, you know, privileged enough to be able to